Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Hello and welcome to the introductory episode of the Rapid podcast series, Radiopharmaceutical Therapy and Dosimetry, with me, George Sgouros, the podcast in which we examine different facets of radiopharmaceutical therapy and how dosimetry can enhance the efficacy of this really novel treatment modality. It'll be a series of podcasts where I, as your host, will interview and have discussions with different individuals that have advanced this field. I'm co-founder of a startup called Rapid and also professor in the Johns Hopkins University Department of Radiology and Radiological Science. I'm head of my lab that investigates different aspects of implementing radiopharmaceutical therapy. So the lab does both mice, people, and also in silico studies. And I'm also director of the Radiological Physics Division in the Department of Radiology. Joining with me today is our podcast producer, and by far one of my favorite kids. I have Denis Sgouros, is one of the three of my favorite children.
That was a great take, Dr. Sgouros. If we can reread that exactly as written in the script, I believe what's written there is joined with me today is our podcast producer and by far my most favorite child, Denis Sgouros. If you can just do that bit from the top.
Right. So just to clarify, I have three kids. Denis is the oldest. And then I have twin girls, Helen and Marie. All three kids are my favorite.
That's great. Let's just get one take as it's written.
Right. Yeah, that's not going to happen because I don't want to get into trouble.
Thank you. And it's good to be here. This episode will be unique in that for this episode only, I'll be serving as the host. Does that sound good to you?
Yep, that sounds great.
Kicking off, could you provide a layman's definition for RPT, dosimetry, and their place in the field of cancer treatments?
Yeah, certainly. So RPT, or radiopharmaceutical therapy. And let me just start with the definition. So R stands for radio, P stands for pharmaceutical, and T stands for therapy. So we're talking about a type of therapy that incorporates radiation, but does so using pharmaceuticals. People are familiar with RT, or external beam radiotherapy, where the radiation comes from outside the body. This is a treatment approach where we attach radioactive atoms to pharmaceuticals that circulate throughout the body, recognize ideally tumor cell surface molecules, and stick to those molecules. And the radiation is delivered by these agents that are already tagged with a radioactive atom. So it's a very specific way of delivering radioactivity to cancer cells, rather specifically cancer cells rather than normal tissues. And I think the most unique feature about it, in essence, it's a very simple modality. You identify a target on a cell surface, you find a molecule that binds to that target, and ideally you radiolabel that molecule, meaning you attach a radioactive atom to the molecule. Once you have this radiolabeled agent, the RP part of the treatment, you inject it intravenously. It circulates around the body. When it encounters a tumor cell, it stays on the tumor cell because it sticks to it. Once it's stuck to it, the radioactive part decays, and ideally those decays happen more frequently on tumor cells than on the way to getting to the tumor cells. So that's kind of where the dosimetry part comes in. You want to optimize the part of the radiation that is emitted while the agent is getting to the cells versus while it's sitting on the cells. So I'll just stop there because I don't know if I've lost too many people, but I'll ask you, does that sound like it makes sense? And if not, let me know.
Well, I don't have a background in nuclear medicine. However, my takeaway from your field has always been that radiopharmaceutical therapy and dosimetry are the toolkits to an alternative treatment for cancer beyond just chemotherapy.
I'm glad you said that. I want to add to this discussion the importance of nuclear medicine. These are agents that we can image and see where they're going. You think of most cancer treatment agents, and they're administered. Nobody really knows exactly where they're going. So one of the key features of radiopharmaceutical therapy, or RPT, is that we can use nuclear medicine methodologies to actually see where the agent is going, rather than sort of treat, without having an understanding of where the agent is going and how long it stays in different parts of the body.
Can you, for our listeners and myself, clarify what you mean by agent?
So when I say agent, I mean a pharmaceutical that is attached to a radioactive atom. And the pharmaceutical is designed to recognize and attach tumor cells. So, for example, a lot of work has been done on somatostatin receptors, which appear on neuroendocrine tumors. Also, a really exciting new treatment approach is an agent that binds to PSMA prostate-specific membrane antigen. So those are both relatively low molecular weight. There are also a bunch of antibody-related agents. And again, by agent, I mean the RP part of RPT, the radiolabeled pharmaceutical part. So pharmaceutical is a very general term for pretty much things that you inject into the body. At least that's sort of the implied definition, and others could disagree with what pharmaceutical really means.
Seamlessly transitioning. When we've talked about radiopharmaceutical therapy and dosimetry, do these sciences have relevancy in other fields beyond merely cancer treatment?
Right. I'd have to say the main application is going to be in cancer, and perhaps people have looked at things like irradiating plaques for heart disease, but really the main one is for cancer treatment.
Okay, I feel like I just asked you if shoes are just for feet.
Yeah, I guess that's a good analogy. I mean, yeah,
I'd like to make very clear that my background is in marketing.
okay.
But let's move on. Now that we've established a broad overview of your field expertise, what can listeners expect from this podcast series?
Yeah, so I've seen what the script says, and I'm going to ignore it.
Okay.
What I think this podcast will do is it will expand on radiopharmaceutical therapy, ideally make it more familiar to people that might not be familiar with it, especially patients and also perhaps the cancer treatment community, and explain through discussions with individuals that are involved in this field how it works and what are the opportunities for making it work better, and really get into the guts of things in a way that's understandable to people. And I'm hoping that we'll find a group of people that will be willing and give their thought on and their perspective on radiopharmaceutical therapy. And it's the importance of imaging and also the role of dosimetry in implementing this treatment modality.
And I'm hoping we'll find sponsors.
That would be nice.
What topics in particular are you looking forward to discussing this season?
I would say my favorite one is the potential importance of alpha particle emitter-based RPT. The role of imaging, the role of dosimetry, the tension between industry wanting to get a drug out as fast as possible and implementing this treatment modality by incorporating imaging and incorporating dosimetry to try and optimize it for an individual patient. And I think this tension really amounts to finding something in between, say, discussing various approaches to implementing dosimetry, and certainly talk about the idea that it is possible to image alpha emitters. That comes down to the question of quantification of when you get an image, it may not look pretty. The question then is, to what extent can you extract from it values that are relevant for estimating absorbed dose, specifically values that are along the lines of the activity concentration in different tissues? I'd like to keep it, more general and focus more on radiopharmaceutical therapy and the distinction between this treatment and other treatments. We haven't really talked about chemotherapy and that what's called biologic therapy. And I'd like to spend at least one of the podcasts discussing biologic therapy. I think you can't really talk about RPT without talking about what the other options are for patients. And then probably, you haven't stopped me yet, but in a brief discussion on where it fits in and the fact that it truly is a multidisciplinary treatment approach. It's not, one or the other field.
Stop.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just kidding. You were actually on a roll.
Yeah. As I talk, I start thinking about things. It's not just radiation oncology or nuclear medicine. And it really has to be multidisciplinary with physics involved as well. And that's a challenge. When you think of industry, they don't want complexity. They want something that works simply and can be implemented widely. And, that's appropriate because things don't work if the finances aren't there. So I'll stop there.
Well, one topic that you didn't mention that I would like to bring to listeners' attention, you very recently received, and when I say you, I mean your lab, your team, very recently received a $15 million grant from the National Cancer Institute at the National Institute of Health that's meant to research targeted radiation therapy for tough to treat cancers.
And also, I just found out today that I received the Paul C. Aebersold Award. And I looked recently at the previous awardees. It's really, I'm joining some true luminaries. You know, it's hard to express how honored I feel about this award. And sort of I get emotional about these things. So I'm truly emotional about getting this award anyway. So it's a tremendous honor.
Well, no, let's talk more about this. This award, how long have you known about it for?
Yeah, pretty much my whole career since I started going to SNMMI.
How long does your career span exactly?
Yeah, a very long time. I mean, what's interesting is that just longevity in the field has made me an expert.
Well, this is incredible. I did not know that you just today received an additional award. Congratulations.
Thank you. The email just came out. So let's see. It's for outstanding achievements in basic science applied to nuclear medicine. So yeah, that's what it's for. And it's a huge honor that the society is conferring on me.
The Society
of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging. Yeah, so I've got a bunch of emails congratulating me.
That's huge. And I'm thrilled to hear that. There's no joke here, but I'm just proud to be your son.
Well,
and I'm even prouder to be your producer.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Listeners that found this podcast online might see the Rapid logo. And aside from being the driving force of this podcast and the company you co-founded and the company that pays me, can you share with our listeners what is Rapid?
As a, pretty well published person in this field, I would have lots of companies once this field started being recognized. And again, it's longevity. I mean, I've stuck with this throughout my whole career, which means it's hard not to have a pretty extensive publication record. So companies interested in going into this area would contact me and were asking me dosimetry questions. And in some cases, they wanted actual dosimetry calculations, which involved getting resources from the university involved. And that was happening frequently enough that Eric Fry, a specialist in quantitative imaging, I went to him recognizing that imaging is critical for all this, talked about a startup. From my perspective, it would be something that would answer at least in the beginning, an unmet need, so that I could offload these requests to a group of people that had come together, basically the company, to help out these biotech companies. So we went on what I think is a boot camp.
I remember that. You went on a business boot camp while I was in high school.
Yes, it was called ICOR. Yeah.
I'm in my 30s now, but just to let people have an idea what it was.
Yeah, so it was quite a while ago. And the outcome of that is that it made sense to start a business in this field. And from my perspective, anything that helps, promote the field is something I want to be doing. I mean, it's been an interesting journey. I was there as the founder. It's grown and there's a market for it. And we started it pretty much at the same time that a bunch of other people with similarly well-established abilities in dosimetry and imaging were doing their own startups. You're in a right thing if there's competition, and that's my view on this. So we provide both a service, and we've also recently established a software product.
Broad overview. You exist in a field, radiopharmaceutical therapy and dosimetry, that after having spent decades in the field, if not pioneering the field, then it feels like it's only within the last decade or so that people are starting to realize the value of it, and it's getting all of this fanfare and attention now.
It's paid off in terms of feeling good that this is finally being recognized and getting grants and things like that. Whether it's paid off financially is sort of a different issue. But there's no question, literally billions are being spent by large companies buying up smaller companies that have started up products in this field, or more specifically RPTs in this field. When billions are being spent, I mean, that says something about the treatment modality. So it's very exciting. And I do think it deserves more attention. and really needs to be recognized as a non-toxic, fundamentally different approach to treating cancer. Really focused on cancer, where metastatic cancer, where chemotherapy and biologic therapy would apply. And again, it is a fundamentally different approach, but it's focused on the one thing where metastatic cancer, where the odds of getting an effective treatment go down pretty dramatically. And that's what I find very exciting about RPT.
How are advances directly benefiting patients?
I mean, the advances you can think of having molecules that target a wider variety of cancers. I mean, it'd be great if breast cancer, for example, could be a target. We don't really have molecules that can be used to target breast cancer or, brain cancer, or many of the different liver cancer, kidney cancer. So there's a whole host of cancers where you could develop pharmaceuticals that you could then radiolabel that could target these cancers. So there's a lot to do there in terms of, right. So that's the advances part, and imaging and dosimetry, I think, would go hand in hand. So I'm focusing less on that and more on sort of the fundamental pieces that one would need to expand the realm of application for cancer patients. So right now, there are a handful of FDA-approved agents, and that list is growing longer and longer. So prostate cancer patients are benefiting because there are agents that can target bony disease, metastases to bone, that are generally very difficult to treat. And also, more recently, agents that can target soft tissue metastases, wherever they happen to be. And so the last one is coupled with an imaging agent, which means you can really see how much tumor is in the patient and then decide whether the therapeutic component is an appropriate treatment approach. Yeah, so right now we have a relatively limited set of agents for a limited set of cancers. There's so much investment in this field that I see this just expanding pretty dramatically over the next, I guess, decade, I would say.
Thank you. Let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll ask you a bit more questions about your experience as a two-time cancer survivor and how that has colored your outlook on the industry.
Right. Being a cancer survivor, and I don't know that too many people listening to this even know this, in reality, has pretty much a minimal effect. I would say it's less me and more people I know that have died of cancer. And that's sort of where, the motivation comes from. So, everybody is touched by cancer, and that's sort of what I react to. In terms of my professional thing, how did I get into nuclear medicine? Well, I mean, and that's why I say I've been in the field a long time. I was in high school in New York, and my dad told me that Memorial Hospital is the place to go. And so I went there starting out as a volunteer. And what's funny that when the volunteer office asked why I was interested in working at Memorial Hospital.
Memorial Sloan Kettering?
Yeah, Memorial Sloan Kettering. Right. Rather than say, I want to help people and all that stuff, I said, I want to work in a research lab. So the reaction to that was, would you be willing to be a transport person? Basically meaning push patients on hospital beds around the place. And I said, sure, I'll do that. And then they eventually put me in a research lab, which was Rod Bigler's lab. Some of this is actually written in a recent medical physics write-up. I'll just reference that. But basically, after 2 days of waiting in Rod Bigler's office, he finally came, and that sort of triggered my move to nuclear medicine. And he had received a contract by the NIH to develop phantoms and dosimetry applicable to this completely new field of radiolabeled pharmaceuticals, or radioimmunotherapy as it was known at the time. And I just stuck with it. I would say my environment, more than anything, is really what led to my interest in this. This was, Sloan Kettering Medical Physics Department and nuclear medicine, really all sort of at the time headed by really the key people that established the field. And I think that's an experience that's really hard to replicate. So I was lucky enough to be in that environment.
So Dr. Rod Bigler was sort of your mentor when you were in high school.
Yeah. Well, Rodney Bigler, yes. Yeah, who since passed away.
And it's very interesting that you mentioned that he received a grant from the NIH, which is incredibly difficult. And you recently also received a grant. It sounds like you're following in your mentor's footsteps, and I'm sure you're doing his legacy proud.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. But yes, I think your characterization is pretty much correct.
Well, when I'm in my 50s and when I find the cure to cancer on my own, I'm sure I'll make you proud.
Yeah, it's really never on.
For listeners at home, my dad is a very sentimental man, and he's either tearing up or blowing his nose. He's laughing now.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to puncture the mood with that, but what does all of this mean to you right now? I mean, your research has truly shaped the industry.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't quite say shape the industry. I would say, it's a small part of the field, dosimetry. It's integral to it, but again, because of longevity and because doing this stuff is required to get approval, I've become sort of somebody that people go to when they want to sort of do the stuff required by the regulatory agencies. The key part of this is really the discovery and the radiochemistry, finding the molecules that will target the specific cancers and then doing the radiochemistry to tag these molecules with radioactive atoms. That's the guts of RPT. I mean, imaging and dosimetry are what distinguishes this treatment modality from all the other treatment modalities. And I think it's the key to its successful implementation. Not everybody thinks that, but it's something that I really believe in. And I've sort of dedicated myself to trying to create the tools to make implementation of imaging and dosimetry really easy so that they'll be more commonly used. And again, I want to stress that these tools, this approach isn't available for other cancer treatment modalities, and especially alpha emitters. I mean, I can go on and on about how unique and amazing alpha particle emitters are and how they could really be a breakthrough.
And we will have an episode dedicated to alpha emitters.
Okay, great.
Available for sponsorship to the highest bidding sponsor. I think we're about at time. I'd like to thank you for your time. I'd like to thank Radiopharmaceutical and Imaging and Dosimetry LLC, or RAPID, for being the driving force behind this podcast. I'd like to thank our listeners. Tune in for future episodes with Dr. George Sgouros and his guests.
Thank you for setting this up. And again, to thank anybody that's listening. I hope we have more than one or two listeners. From my perspective, this is a mechanism for enhancing the visibility of this treatment approach. And to the extent we can do that, that's really wonderful. Thanks.
All right. What did you think?
If I had been able to keep my emotional stuff intact and not waver my voice during some moments, it would have been really good.
I would not beat yourself up over that at all.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing how it all comes together.
Yeah.
Are you on the clock for this? Probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting paid for this, of course.
Okay. Good. Okay. Thank you.
Love you, Dad.
Bye. Love you too. Yeah, looking forward to seeing how it all comes together. Bye-bye.
This has been the Radiopharmaceutical Therapy and Dosimetry podcast with Dr. George Sgouros. Produced by me, Denis Sgouros. Executive produced by Dr. Michael Ghali at Rapid Dosimetry. You can rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts. Got a question for George? Or interested in Rapid Dosimetry's products and services? Email us at dsgouros@rapiddosimetry.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe wherever podcasts are downloaded.